Bloppity Bloop, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Nate Hawley, and with me is our very own cartoon clone trooper, Will Heckerman.
Watch out! Clankus!
This week, we're going to be talking about something that we feel often gets overlooked in Star Wars, and that is the cartoons. But before we do that, we're going to move right along to our first segment, Bustin' with Happiness, where we each talk about something from that world of Star Wars that has made us happy this week. Jar Jar?
Mr. Bustin' with Happiness.
So, Will, what have you been enjoying in the world of Star Wars this week?
I'm gonna have to say that with this influx of media and clips and teasers, TV spots, I still have yet to see, personally, any spoilers, or at least any big spoilers, which usually by this point I've seen something drop myself. And I'm proud of myself for avoiding it, but it's making me happy for that.
For sure. Yeah, there's been a lot. I have not been able to avoid as much. I mean, I haven't seen anything that hasn't been officially released. Like, I haven't seen any leaks or anything like that. But there was a clip they just released that I was really surprised they released it. I haven't watched it, but I know what happens in it. And, it's intense. But excited to see it in context in the movie. This week, I've been rewatching all the movies. If you follow me on Twitter, I've been doing the hashtag 12 Days of Star Wars, where I've been watching all the theatrically released films in chronological order, with the 12th day being Thursday's release of The Rise of Skywalker. So today, as of recording this, we're recording on Sunday. I still have to watch The Empire Strikes Back, which I'll do after we're done recording. But it's been really great. I've just loved revisiting these movies, and I love them all. I think one of the things I was not necessarily surprised by, but I love Revenge of the Sith more and more every time I watch it.
Same.
And I used to love it, and then I, got jaded by, whatever, and kind of hated it. And then for a while, after coming back into being more positive about Star Wars, The Phantom Menace was my favorite prequel. And I still really enjoy that movie, but something about this most recent viewing of Revenge of the Sith just really got me. It's just a really good movie, and I love what George does with it. The effects hold up today. Like, people complain about the overuse of CGI, but for the most part, all of the CGI holds up to stuff that comes out right now, 14 years later. But yeah, I love that movie. Other than that, been keeping up on The Mandalorian, Star Wars Resistance, still trucking along on Master and Apprentice.
Nice.
Anything else you've been enjoying in Star Wars?
I've been getting through the Darth Vader comic that you've been letting me borrow.
Oh, nice.
I'm only a few issues away from being done with that.
For our listeners, this is Charles Soule's Darth Vader run, his 25-issue run.
So I think I'm on issue 21 or 22.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, dude, I sat down one day and busted out like 15 in a row.
Right on.
I've been enjoying that quite a bit.
So good.
It's really good. And then I did have a similar experience a couple years ago right before The Force Awakens came out with Revenge of the Sith, to where I had never really... I thought it was better than 2, but I still liked 1 more. I think I still lean more towards 1,
sure.
Just because I am in love with the dual blade.
Yeah, absolutely.
That Darth Maul has. It was my then girlfriend, now wife, who really kind of pointed out that it is a very well structured movie.
Yeah.
And then made me really just see it in the way that she sees it in a much better light, and now I appreciate it even more because of her.
Yeah, and I love how I just love that even though it was filled with stuff that we knew had to happen, it still subverted expectations because, like, in the prequel trilogy, there isn't really a Star War. No. Like, the Clone Wars begin at the end of the second one and end at the beginning of the third one.
Right.
Like, it's all about Anakin's personal journey. It's not as much about the galactic conflict, which
the tragedy of Darth Vader.
Yeah, and I love it. And if you hate Revenge of the Sith, I'm sorry that you just can't enjoy good things. But why don't we go ahead and move along to our main topic today, which is the cartoons in Star Wars, which we love.
Finn, let me learn you something big.
All right, as Nate said, we're talking about the cartoons today, the Clone Wars, Rebels, and Resistance. We're going to dive into these three and share why we think everyone should watch them. First up is the Clone Wars. Before we get into it, though, I recently convinced my brother-in-law to watch it, so I asked him to share his thoughts so far. And he says, I've been a Star Wars fan since I was a little kid. My dad was into science fiction, and he passed that along to me. Watching the original trilogy was a regular occurrence in my household. I always enjoy an epic story of good versus evil, and Star Wars certainly provides that in its material. Even though I was exposed to the movies, my fandom, however, never went beyond the movies. I didn't read comics, books, or watch any cartoons. It's only in the past years that I've been able to experience Star Wars outside the films. I've found that content, in many ways, to be even more exciting than the films. The one that has stuck out the most is Clone Wars. Clone Wars has been a revelation. Most of the films focus on a few heroes, which there is nothing wrong with, as it allows you to really connect with the characters. But in this series, however, you are exposed to many heroes, mostly the Jedi Council. Having an avenue to see the Jedi Council works, particularly in a time of war, has been surprisingly refreshing and illuminating to the Star Wars franchise. Most of the time it has you on the edge of your seat. I would recommend Clone Wars to any Star Wars fan. You won't be disappointed. Well, that's definitely my thoughts right there on it, too. They line up pretty good with my brother-in-law. Nate, what are your thoughts on the Clone Wars?
So for a while, this show was Star Wars to me. The Clone Wars movie was that was theatrically released was the first Star Wars film I saw in theaters. And I grew up on the show. I don't even know that I watched the movies as much when the show was going on because I had new Star Wars every week for 5 years. And then they released the unreleased episodes of the 6th season later, but the Clone Wars is what kept my fandom alive. I love this show so much, and I get really emotional about it because it was my Star Wars. People talk about, it was the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy. For me, it was the Clone Wars growing up. That was Star Wars to me, and I got to grow up with Ahsoka. I got to connect with these characters, and it means so much to me.
I had a similar experience to my brother-in-law. I kind of didn't really get into it because the movie kind of came out when I was getting a little too cool for that. and so I just ignored it. I wrote it off as, it's a kid's thing. I'm not going to be into it. And then Disney bought Lucasfilm. Yeah. And that was when my buddy turned to me and said, "Hey, have you ever watched the Clone Wars?" I'm like, "No, I haven't." He convinced me to go ahead and watch it. And I only started watching it right after they had done those unaired episodes.
Oh, in season 6?
Right. Yeah. And but I I probably only got about halfway through season 1 before I turned to other things again. But getting back to it, it kind of turned into I'll put it on when I've got chores that I'm doing. So whenever I was folding laundry, I was watching the Clone Wars at the same time. And then I would sit there and watch 2 more episodes. And I definitely fell in love with it. And I don't know, I grew to enjoy the storytelling and enjoyed a lot of the aspects of the clones, per se.
Yeah.
A lot of my favorite episodes, honestly, are clone-centric, really.
Yeah.
Because I love how it humanizes them.
Yeah.
You know, and it shows that the Republic was, at least the Jedi, were trying to treat them as people.
Yeah.
For the most part. And
Well, most of the Jedi, not all of the Jedi.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they were trying to treat them as people and with different personalities. And that was great to see that all the clones were different, even though they were genetically the same.
Yeah, no,
most
I
part.
love, you know, you have episodes like that first Yoda episode when he's on Toydaria, and he's like, take off your helmets, and they're like, we're all the same, like, why do you care? And he's like, no, I see into you. I see you will have differences in personalities. You're not...
Right.
You are individuals, you are people, or you have, you know, with Plo Koon, and one of his troopers says to him, you know, we're just clones, sir, we're made to be expendable, and he says, not to me.
Not to me, no.
And yeah, I love how the show just humanizes them, you know, you especially get connected to Rex, but also those first rookies from season 1, you know, Fives and Echo and so many more clones. Cody.
Yep.
It's so well done, and what I love about it is it doesn't shy away from the realness of war.
Right.
You know, it is still a kid show. Like, you know, it's not full of like gore or anything, but it's not afraid to go there. Like, I love kids shows that don't talk down to kids. Like,
right.
You know, the target audience is mature enough to understand this, and they go to some really dark places.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's a scene in season 2 where a Mandalorian jumps off a ledge and kills himself.
Yeah.
Like, there's some really intense stuff. You know, it's not targeted towards younger kids, which I think still a lot of the adults in the fandom still have this idea that it's, you know, geared towards little kids, that they won't like it.
Right.
But it is really, you know, the target audience was more, you know, what the target audience for Star Wars has always been. It's, you know, 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
Like, and it doesn't shy away from those hard themes of loss and betrayal and growing up and all these things, and it's so beautiful, and the animation is great. It gets better as the show goes along, for sure. But George Lucas personally funded the show.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Cartoon Network wouldn't have given them the budget to do that. Yeah. But for George, it was important to him that every episode have the same quality of standards as a animated feature film.
Right.
And so he poured his money into it. That's the other thing, is the Clone Wars is the last Star Wars that George Lucas was personally involved in. Mm-hmm. He oversaw it. You know, Dave Filoni is the one who gets all the credit, and rightfully so. You know, he executive produced it and directed it and wrote a lot of it. He created Ahsoka, but all those decisions had to be approved by George, and many of the ideas came from George first. You know, like, you know, my favorite set of episodes, the Mortis arc, Those were ideas by George. I rewatched them yesterday just because I wonder maybe if some of those ideas might play into the Rise of Skywalker. We'll see. But even if they don't, I will always revisit those because they're so beautiful, and I just love this show so much.
What would be a favorite character of yours in this?
Well, I mean, Ahsoka for sure. She was a character I didn't like at first, like a lot of people. Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of people viewed her as a bratty little girl who was weighing down their favorite Jedi.
Yeah. Snips.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Ahsoka is Anakin's Padawan. Yes, Anakin did have a Padawan during the Clone Wars. But you get to see her grow. Like I said earlier, I grew up with Ahsoka. Like, I learned these lessons that Anakin and other Jedi Masters taught her as she was learning them.
Yeah, that actually brings up a good point. They always put that little lesson, the little quote at the beginning.
They called them fortune cookies. The guys working on the show said that was the fortune
cookies. I love it.
Yeah.
And, that's I always thought that was a neat little addition. Yeah, Ahsoka's definitely a favorite in there. Another one would be Asajj Ventress.
Yeah. And she has a great arc.
Oh, dude.
And unfortunately, it didn't get to be completed, but you can read the end of it in the book Dark Disciple.
Yeah.
Which was based on unused scripts because the show got canceled. Scripts written by George Lucas's daughter, Katie Lucas.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I did.
And then Delilah Dawson, I believe, adapted those scripts into the novel Dark Disciple, and that's an adventure that Asajj and Quinlan Vos go on. But she has a great arc. The stuff they do with the Force is really interesting. The Mortis episodes I mentioned before go to this really weird place with these, like, basically gods.
Yeah.
And it gets super spiritual at times, but it also is a war show still. Yeah. Like, we still get those battle-focused episodes. Like you said, I love the clone-focused episodes.
Yeah.
Which it's funny because, it's just D. Bradley Baker in a room talking to himself. But he's such a good actor because he understands each individual clone so well.
It's crazy.
But, like, I love that first Rookies episode.
Yeah.
Where, unfortunately a character dies. And it's really tragic, and you feel it, even though you've only known this character for one episode. Unless you watch the show in chronological order.
Fair.
In which case you get a couple episodes to love him as well.
You were talking about how it gets spiritual times, and another of my favorite moments is when they do the young Padawans and they're going to Ilum and get their kyber crystals. And I mean, lightsabers have always fascinated me.
Sure.
So just seeing it told through the medium was really great, and I really enjoyed seeing that. And then David Tennant as
Hugh Yang. He's so good. I wished when they announced Galaxy's Edge and said there was going to be a lightsaber workshop in it, I had hoped so badly that Hugh Yang was going to be in it. But unfortunately, that's not what's there. But
yeah.
I would love to see that character pop up again. He's so great. This ancient droid voiced by Doctor Who. Like, come on. A couple of other of my favorite characters. Original character to the show is Cad Bane.
Yes.
The best bounty hunter in the galaxy. Sorry, Jango and Boba Fett and The Mandalorian. Cad Bane is the best. Like
that just he is so good. Actually, that was the episode my brother-in-law was talking about, the one where he kidnaps him.
Yeah.
He was talking about that to me the other day, and that's what made me go, well, give me more, you know? And oh man, he's just so good too.
Yeah. He's a Duro's character, and he's just got the greatest personality.
Yeah.
And he's smart as a whip, smarter than most of the opponents he faces, and
Yep.
he usually outwits them, and he's so good. And we just love those fringe characters who are neither necessarily totally good or totally evil, and he plays both sides throughout the show. He works for both sides of the war, and he's such a good character. And I love he has an arc with Obi-Wan, who he doesn't know is Obi-Wan at the time, because Obi-Wan is in disguise, and there's some great moments there. And then I was here at this panel that Dave Filoni and Pablo Hidalgo did at Star Wars Celebration 2017, where they were talking about the animation and just they put up a lot of concept art, a lot of original ideas that Dave had, and talked a lot about conversations Dave had with George and just the development of these shows. And they showed us an unused moment, which would have been in season 6 or 7, because it was actually originally planned to be an 8-season series.
Right.
But yeah, I can't remember which season it was going to be in, but it's this moment. It was an animatic, so it wasn't completely finished animation, but they fully voiced it. And it was the end of this arc of episodes that was going to be Cad Bane teaching Boba Fett how to be a real bounty hunter.
Right. I remember.
And there's this standoff where, they both fire at the same time, and you don't see what happens, but you see the dent in Boba Fett's helmet came from Cad Bane. And it's so good. I also, one of my favorite things this show did was bring back Darth Maul.
Oh yeah. That's really what drew me towards it.
And Sam Witwer plays him, and he's so good. He's so good. I feel like I just keep saying so good about this show, but it really is. But really cemented that Maul was not this, just one-off vicious animal of a villain. That he, Freddie Prinze Jr., who's on Rebels, which we'll talk about later, but he pointed this out in a video a while back, that he's Sisyphus. He's, the story of Sisyphus is this guy is cursed to push a boulder up a mountain only to fall back down and keep doing it. And that's his story.
Yes.
He is the apprentice to the Sith Lord, and by the end of that first movie, the ruler of the galaxy.
Yeah.
And then he gets killed. Seemingly. He doesn't actually die. He gets cut in half, brought to the lowest point ever, and then he's found later by his brother, who then is able to help him out of his squalor and
madness,
and he gets to the point of wanting to take revenge, and he almost gets to kill Obi-Wan, and then he's brought low again.
Yep.
And then he comes back up and becomes this criminal warlord, and then ruler of Mandalore. Yeah. And then his master comes back and he's brought back low again. And then eventually, in the Darth Maul comic, the Dark Horse comic, the only Dark Horse comic that's canon, which was made on, again, adapted from unreleased or unused scripts. He's then freed from prison. He gets out and he becomes the ruler of Mandalore again. And we'll see the end of that part of his journey in season 7 of the Clone Wars,
right?
Which I want to talk some more about that in a minute. But then, at some point he becomes a crime boss again, as we see him in Solo, and then he's brought low again, and he's in this pit in Malachor, and Ezra finds him, and then he gets back up, and then he goes down, and he's Sisyphus, and it's such a good arc, and he's such a good character. He's so much more than the brief moment we see him in The Phantom Menace. And for that arc alone, I think, is reason enough to watch the show. But there's so much good stuff that we've talked about with the humanization of the clones, and with Ahsoka, you learn more about Anakin. A lot of people complain that Anakin's fall to the dark side is too quick in the movies. But you have to understand that what George was doing with those movies was showing basically the 3 most pivotal moments in Anakin's life.
Right.
But if you watch the Clone Wars, you get more of Anakin's journey, and you start to understand.
You see him as a hero in the... Yes.
And you start to understand why he fell, because there's so much going on. He's under so much pressure.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's so good.
Before we wrap up with it, I wanted to mention how I love a lot of the designs, but specifically a lot of the starship designs. And I'm kind of going through a little thing on my phone, pulling them up, and I love it really shows more of a World War II, early 1900s design in these ships, especially Xanadu Blood, which is Cad Bane's ship, and like the Arc 170, and just these neat designs, just not something you expect out of Star Wars, but it's so crisp and cool.
Yeah.
The Y-wings that they had were,
Absolutely.
With the gunner seat and everything.
Yeah, a lot of great design work. Before we wrap up, I did want to mention that the show is coming back. Was it 2 years ago they announced it, I think? Yeah, 2 years ago at Comic-Con.
Right, yep, that's it.
For the 10th anniversary of the show. No, last year.
Yeah, it would have been last year.
Last year, for the 10th anniversary of the
Getting ahead
show.
of ourselves.
Yeah, they were talking about the series, and we all thought it was just going to be celebrating 10 years of the Clone Wars, but then at the end, they revealed that Disney is letting Dave finish the show.
Yeah.
Because he didn't get to give the show an ending because it was canceled. Mm-hmm. And, we did get a season 6 with the episodes that were finished, but that wasn't necessarily how they wanted to release them. I said the show was originally planned to be an 8-season show. But now Dave gets his ending, and we've seen a couple trailers for season 7. They've changed up the animation style a little bit to make it a little more expressive, and it looks great.
So nice.
One of the things I've loved, they were talking a little bit behind the scenes, is for the Maul stuff, because Maul is coming back here, we'll see the Siege of Mandalore, which was basically the final battle of the Clone Wars before the Battle of Coruscant and Revenge of the Sith. For the Maul fights, this was the first time they actually filmed Ray Park doing stunt choreography and then animated to that.
Yeah.
It's so good. I love that they brought him back for this, so it feels even more like Darth Maul.
Right. I just love that it essentially cements him and Sam Witwer both being that character. And it's just... I love it.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for the new season to come out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, we're going to get the Bad Batch, which is... you can watch these unfinished episodes. We don't know if they're just going to finish those unfinished episodes and release those, or if they're going to leave the unfinished episodes as is and then do completely new ones.
Right.
But there's this squadron of clone troopers who are for lack of a better term, defective. They have deformities, and they form an elite squad, and they're called the Bad Batch, and I'm excited to see them in action and see Ahsoka come back. I'm just so excited. I believe it's supposed to come out February next year,
you're right,
February 2020. So we'll definitely be talking about that when it comes out, and we have some ideas for some Clone Wars related content that we're not ready to talk about just yet, but we've got some ideas brewing for that. But why don't we go ahead and move on to the next series chronologically and also in real time, Star Wars Rebels.
Now, see, Rebels is a little different. We find ourselves following the journeys of Phoenix Squadron, a small rebel cell fighting back against the Empire. And it takes a different approach to the storytelling. We don't get the wide scope and serialization we got from the Clone Wars, and the story ends up being more of an overarch throughout each season. And we get to see some of the day-to-day life under the rule of the Empire, which, as I mentioned in the holiday special episode, I really like seeing that, actually. But what's also interesting is we see some of the threads left open from the Clone Wars get their closure.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dave Filoni was the executive producer on this series as well. And this is the first piece of Star Wars content that Disney released since their buyout. It came out in 2014. Yep. I remember I was a freshman in college and watching this series come out, and it does some really cool things. I wasn't sure how I felt about the show at first, but as it goes on, I just fall in love with it. You say it's about Phoenix Squadron. I would say more specifically it's about the crew of the Ghost, who become a part of Phoenix Squadron in the Rebel Alliance. But as they, it's this small group of rebels who then
join a bigger picture.
Join a rebel cell who then joins the Rebel Alliance, and it gets bigger and bigger. And then it gets small again, and I don't want to spoil too much because we do want you to watch these shows. But I love what they do with scope and scale. Like you said, it starts out with this like day-to-day stuff. Before it gets into the big galactic consequences, and then it shrinks back down. It goes back to how it affects this small group of people.
One thing that I enjoy, especially looking back, is what we talked about last time about the hero's journey, is that in my rewatch I'm seeing a lot of these themes from the hero's journey come out, and especially in Ezra's arc specifically. And, we get to see this, we get to grow up with Ezra, too. We get to see him grow up and become this young man who just becomes a hero in his own right.
Yeah.
And then they bring back some other favorites from the Clone Wars and from
the original trilogy.
Trilogy. And we get to see Thrawn as well.
Yeah. First time Thrawn appears in canon since the Disney buyout, and he's voiced by Lars Mikkelsen.
Oh my god.
If you read the original Thrawn books, which are now not canon, but the voice in your head is exactly Lars Mikkelsen. His voice as Thrawn is so good. And
that's just, I hadn't actually read those books, and so seeing Thrawn on the show, I immediately took to him. I'm not usually one to glorify too many villains, but Maul and Thrawn are two that I've took to.
Yeah.
And just for different reasons.
Yeah, sure. We see Maul come back. We see Ahsoka. There's some great Vader stuff. Mm-hmm. We see some arcs with clones who are now old men in thanks to growth acceleration.
Right.
And they get to do some interesting things. In the ranking, if we want to rank, I don't particularly like to put Star Wars over Star Wars, but Rebels is my favorite of these three. As much as the Clone Wars means to me personally, because it was my Star Wars for a long time, the story of Rebels just gets me. The more I think about it, and it is smaller scale. It is about this one crew of this one ship, and more specifically about this one kid's journey into becoming a man. And it's so beautiful. The show introduced us to now one of my top 5 favorite characters, which is Kanan. Yeah. I love Kanan Jarrus so much. When we first meet him, he's basically Han Solo as a Jedi.
That's fair.
That was how they came up with the idea. They're like, what if Han Solo was a Jedi? And that they came up with Kanan. But then he grows too. He has his own journey, and he becomes this this great Jedi master, this serene, wise man, and who's guiding this impulsive kid who has his own struggles and need to belong. And it's just about this family on this ship, and it's so beautiful.
I gotta say, some of my favorite moments were when they brought in Bendu.
Yeah. I love the Bendu, voiced by another Doctor Who, Tom Baker.
Ta-da! There seems to be a pattern showing here with us. Just his moments, and I felt like Baker's voice was so perfect for it. And I get that little laugh in my head, and it just it just makes me smile and giggle.
Yeah, I love him. He's this big creature, like something out of Neverending Story.
Yeah.
He looks kind of like Rockbiter from Neverending Story a bit. But he's this, he says, there's the light and the dark. He's the one in the middle, and he's just so fun. And there's so many fun, interesting characters. We get Agent Callus, who's this Imperial ISB agent who has an incredible arc.
Yeah.
And I don't want to spoil that, but he goes on a journey, and it's just about this family and this kid's planet, and how this family helps that planet and then helps the galaxy. Some of my favorite moments in Star Wars as a whole are in this show. I mean, the end of season 2, Twilight of the Apprentice.
So good.
Oh my goodness. Ahsoka fighting Vader. Some great stuff with Maul in there, Inquisitors.
Yep.
And there's just so many moments that just break your heart. And
oh my god, yes.
Kevin Kiner's score in that, which we didn't talk about for Clone Wars either. Kevin Kiner scored all these shows, and he is a genius, man. The way he uses John Williams themes and puts his own spin on them, and then develops new themes out of them for the new characters. It's brilliant. Like the Twin Moons track from the Rebels score is such a great spin on the Binary Sunset. It's not the same music, but it's emotionally taken out of that,
right.
And he just does some beautiful work, especially in Twilight of the Apprentice.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear when I'm listening to my Star Wars playlist, and the end track of that episode, where they're on their journey back, it gets me every time. They're like, do, do, do. This chorus, and I probably sound horrible. But it's just beautiful.
I gotta say, my favorite characters I tend to take to the younger ones. Would be Ezra in his whole arc, and I liked what they did with him. But I also really enjoyed Sabine Wren, who it's great because she's Mandalorian, and so there's the warrior, the extremely skilled warrior aspect of it, but then she's also an artist.
Yeah,
and like that is such a big part of her character too, and it wasn't something I expected. Again, they always do these things that I'm not expecting that I love.
Yeah,
and
she has a great arc, coming back and meeting with her family and her people. Again, I won't spoil anything about that, but there's some great stuff. And if you know anything about Grand Admiral Thrawn, you know that art is a big deal for him.
Yep.
And when he's fighting his enemies, he likes to analyze the artwork of the cultures he's participating in battle with, and he thinks the art reveals more about people than their behaviors do, and so that puts them in a lot of trouble when they have this artist on their team as a major member of their family, and they have the art versus the art critic
I love it.
fighting each other, and there's some really great moments between them.
Again, I gotta mention the ships. We see a lot of the classic ships return. We see essentially the origin of the original trilogy, Y-Wing and B-Wing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then we have the Ghost, obviously, with the Phantom, and then the Phantom 2.
Yeah.
And it's just following in these steps of these great designs, and you'll learn I'm a big space fight fan.
Yeah. I gotta stop you for a second because you brought up the B-Wings, and the episode where they introduce the B-Wings is one of my favorites in the series.
Oh, yeah, dude.
They introduce this character called Quarry, who is named after Ralph McQuarrie. Gosh, I couldn't remember his first name. I wanted to say Chris McQuarrie, and he directed the Mission Impossible movies. Not him. Ralph McQuarrie. Sorry, Ralph, wherever you are. But he's this eccentric, tiny Mon Calamari character who works on these ships, and Hera gets to pilot this B-Wing, which was experimental at the time. And
one of my favorite ships.
So it's such a great ship, and it's such a great episode. That the track they have for that, Hera Soars, when she's flying the B-Wing for the first time, is beautiful. And it gets me emotionally every time I hear it. Man, there's just so much good stuff in this episode, or in this series, and man, it's just really a testament to Dave Filoni as a creator and as a series producer. The fact he got to end the show on his terms, like that was the big thing with Clone Wars, is he didn't get to write his ending, which now thankfully he does. Right. But he knew from day one of making this series of a general arc of how he wanted to craft the show and how he wanted to end it. And so the 4 seasons of the series are exactly his plan, his story from beginning to end.
It's especially good for Dave because he this is the first time he's kind of in a way on his own.
Yeah.
And he gets to show I didn't just be, George's, right-hand man during Clone Wars. I'm a creator, and, I know what I'm doing with this, and I feel like we wouldn't have a lot of the stuff we're getting today without Rebels.
Yeah, absolutely. And without Dave, I cannot just praise Dave Filoni enough. He is the heir apparent to George Lucas.
Yeah.
He was trained personally by him, basically. And like there was that interview, we mentioned it in an earlier episode, where Kathleen Kennedy said that there's not a beat of storytelling in Star Wars that Kathy Kennedy doesn't run by Dave.
Yeah.
Because he understands Star Wars better than anyone. I will say, anyone. No one knows Star Wars better than Dave Filoni.
I love interviews with him because he is he's so good at giving just enough.
He is the cagiest.
Oh my God. Yes, I love it. It's where you just go, oh, Dave, but I'm satisfied.
Yeah, he knows his way around an interview.
It's great,
and I love it, especially when he's with his casts, because they don't know their ways. I mean, eventually they learn, but like especially those early interviews with the Rebels cast, and he'd be like, "Guys, no, guys." He has to keep an eye on them, and I love how they like feign being terrified of him, or like, I don't know if I could.
Yeah.
Will Dave hurt me?
Right. Yeah, I love how that was kind of the vibe you got during Celebration this year with the panel they all did, and they'd ask them a question. They'd almost all look to Dave each time.
Right.
Like, can I say this much about it?
Yeah, and they're like, well, the series is out now, so
right.
So the series is done, so you can finally talk about it.
Right. And it's just like, yeah, go on.
Man, we love Rebels so much. I can't wait. You're rewatching it right now.
Yep.
I can't wait to
about
rewatch it myself.
Episode a day right now.
Cool. Yeah.
Roughly.
And yeah, there's just so much great moments. Some really spiritual stuff in there as well.
Yeah.
I won't tell you what it is, but the world between worlds, guys. I don't know if it's gonna show up in the Rise of Skywalker. It probably won't. But man, if it does, I will die happy, because holy heck, it is the coolest thing ever. I love that episode of Rebels so much.
It's fascinating for me. It just I was in awe watching that episode.
Yeah, they just do so much to deepen the lore, but we have one more show to talk about, so do you have any other closing thoughts on Rebels that you can think of?
No, actually. So we're gonna move on to Resistance. I'm not fully caught up on it. So that's part of the interesting part, is it's a show that's that's being shown right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not caught up on it with this latest season, but I have watched all the way through season 1. So I'm gonna let Nate take over.
So Resistance. We didn't really say the timeline with Rebels. The Rebels takes place like just a few years it starts like 3 or 4 years before A New Hope,
right.
Before Rogue One, if you want to technically stick that in there. But with Resistance, it starts just 6 months before The Force Awakens. And it is a much different show than either of these two.
Yeah.
Rebels, in a way, sometimes feels like a sequel to Clone Wars. Resistance is entirely separate.
Oh, yeah.
It isn't about Force users. There are no Jedi in this show, which, why would there be? Because Luke is on an island, and there's Kylo Ren, but he doesn't really get involved in much. And then, it's before The Force Awakens, so Rey hasn't shown up. So,
right.
that's it with the Force users. But it's about this Resistance spy named Kazuda Xiono, and he's a klutz. He is the goofiest kid. And he has some great moments with Poe Dameron early on in the season, who they brought Oscar Isaac back in to voice, which was really cool. in season 1, he has a lot of moments with BB-8. They leave BB-8 with Kaz on this station, the Colossus. So Kaz is this resistance spy working on this refueling station to try to see if there's anything he can learn about the First Order while working there. And he works for this mechanic named Yeager, who's a old rebel pilot, and it's such a fun show. So this one's geared towards younger audiences, whereas the other ones, were like 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. This one's geared more towards like 6 or 7 or 8. But there's so much fun for the whole family. Like, it's not like I said, it doesn't talk down to these kids. There's some really silly moments for sure that the little kids will really appreciate. But if you're a diehard Star Wars fan, there's so much in there that you're gonna love as well. What I love is something you keep saying is like the day-to-day life. But this one is interesting because it's not day-to-day life under the oppression of the Empire or the First Order, because they haven't really shown up yet. They're out there hiding, kind of doing their thing. But this is a free society on this station, and you just get to see such cool moments of just day-to-day life as a mechanic, as a racer. There's a lot of racing of starships. And I know you're not caught up on the show, but I'm sure you love this series because you love ships so much, and it's kind of all about ships. So
a lot of it is about the ships. Yep. I love the fact that Yeager as a mechanic, it's the big thing at Colossus is the racing, and so Yeager works as a mechanic, and he's got his own ship that they're trying to repair to make it so it can be raced.
Yeah, it's called the Fireball because it explodes so much.
And that's a cute little thing but you see these other pilots as well that come in, and you see all this personality that I really enjoy seeing just in this little space. And
yeah, that's what I love so much about season 1 is it, for the most part, all takes place on this one station.
Right.
And we haven't really seen that in Star Wars of what it's like for people who don't leave. Like, we've seen, Luke leaves Tatooine, Ezra leaves Lothal, Rey leaves Jakku. Like, we've seen these people leave. We talked last week about the hero's journey and, about the ordinary world. This is a story of someone who comes from the special world and enters into the ordinary world in a way.
There you go. Yeah.
Because Kaz first starts before he's a resistance spy, and he's a terrible spy.
Yeah.
But like I said, he's a klutz, and that is not what you want in a spy, is someone who constantly trips and draws attention to themselves. But before he was a spy, he was a Republic pilot.
Yep. And
so he's from this galactic conflict. The conflict isn't really real yet because, the First Order hasn't shown up. But he's rich. We haven't seen a Star Wars character who comes from wealth. Really. I mean, Padme, I guess. But, like, the lead character is almost always an orphan from destitute. Yeah, like either a slave or a moisture farmer or a scavenger. Like, we haven't seen someone who came from privilege, who came from wealth, who had a position in the new government of the galaxy. And he comes in to be this spy, and he's terrible at it, on this one station of these people who are just living everyday lives, and he can't reveal it to anyone. Right. The only person who knows he's a spy is Yeager at first. But, yeah, I kind of love that idea of someone coming from the special world entering into the ordinary world as part of their hero's journey. Is kind of an interesting concept.
Throws it on its head. I love that. Yeah. I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Now. And you also see a nice variety of aliens and creatures in it as well.
So many fun creatures. I love the design of the show, which is, again, such a departure from the previous two. The previous two shows also have their own unique design. Rebels does not look like Clone Wars.
No.
But it feels more similar to Clone Wars than Resistance feels similar to anything.
Yeah.
It's still a 3D animated show, but it's cel shaded, so
that's the word.
It kind of looks 2D-ish. But it's really smooth. A lot of cel shaded shows I've seen tend to look pretty choppy. But it's really smooth and fluid, and they did some really great stuff with it. It's bright as heck. It is really beautiful, like really vibrant colors. Which again, with the Clone Wars, taking place in this dark war, and Rebels taking place in, this under the oppression of the Empire, it makes sense for those shows to look darker and be have a more muted color palette. But this is a free society, and it's just so vibrant and colorful.
One thing about the art that stuck out on me was the first time there was. Well, not the first time we see smoke, but at a point where it fills a corridor, and it, just the way the smoke works in the animation, that's that moment where it just kind of like clicked for me that I was like, this is really, really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was impressed by smoke.
And they took a bit more of an anime approach to it. It's not anime, but they were definitely more inspired by anime this time around. And you can tell that with the way the characters express them. Their faces are very expressive, much more so than either of the previous shows. It feels less... I guess the designs are maybe less realistic than the previous shows, which again are animated shows and, still take their artistic influence. But I feel like this one took a little bit more artistic liberty, which is great. I love seeing designers getting to do what they want to do. Another thing, Dave is not involved in this show. He came up with the idea, with the initial pitch, but in the scope of planning all of this, he was finishing up Rebels and then got the green light to finish Clone Wars, which we didn't know about until later, and then obviously all of his work on Mandalorian as well. So he doesn't have the time to work on Resistance. But now we have Justin Ridge and Athena Portillo, I think is her last name. I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. Who are executive producers, and they do a great job. It's a riveting story. It's not as emotional as the stories of the previous two series, but it's just fun. It's just a good time. The thing that annoys me about the show is its release schedule. Is it comes out on Sundays, and it's streaming first, which so it comes out at midnight, I guess. But when it officially airs on Disney Channel, I think is Sunday evenings. Yeah. And I think later, it's like 8 or 9.
It's really late, yeah.
And for their target audience, it's like these kids need to be in bed before they go to school. So that's the one thing I don't like about the show is it should be a Saturday morning cartoon. That is what it is.
But you got to really think about the way kids are watching, anything these days. It's all streaming.
Sure, yeah.
And it's so, it's kind of sad to think, but the Saturday morning cartoon isn't really as much of a thing, and it's all right there on the phone or tablet.
Yeah.
And so I feel like this is the show where they were pushing their Disney Go, their app.
Disney Now.
Disney Now. Go Now. Plus a bunch of different things for everybody. So you're getting into that medium, and now we do have Disney Plus, and
Yeah, you can watch season 1 on Disney Plus. Season 2, again, which is ongoing right now, which is also the last season.
You're right.
It's only a 2-season show, but it's not getting canceled. This is how the creators want to end the series, which there's already been a lot of great stuff in the show in season 2, and I'm excited to see how it ends.
Season 1, the ending of season 1 was one of my favorite really season finales I've seen in a while.
I love how, we said, it starts 6 months before The Force Awakens. It ends tying into The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And it's such a great, the way they tie it in is really well done, and without making it feel forced, and without, trying to make these smaller scale stories feel bigger than they are. It's a smaller scale story taking place under the umbrella of the larger scale story, and being aware of these larger events, which they do some really interesting stuff with that.
It's going to be a major tangent, but I wonder if that's how some of these Marvel shows are going to feel that we get on Disney Plus, that it's going to be well aware of everything else, but be under the umbrella, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Favorite characters?
Cat. So I'm not a huge fan of Cat.
No.
I like him. I don't hate him. It's not that I dislike Kaz. It's just he's such a klutz, and he's such a terrible spy, and that's the point.
Right.
But it's so annoying that he's not good at his job. But I love Yeager.
Yeager is...
He's so good. He's so, wise, but not in the Jedi way. He's this older mentor character that we've seen before, but it's usually a Force user.
Yeah,
so,
no, you're right.
I like seeing that from an old war hero. You know?
Just a regular guy essentially in the universe now. Tam
is great, and especially what they do with her at the end of season 1, going into season 2. They took a turn that I did not expect at all.
Yeah, I didn't think they would go as far as they did with it.
And it's some really interesting stuff, especially now in season 2, where we're getting into her head about this decision she makes at the end of season 1, and it's some good stuff.
Yeah,
I've really enjoyed her character. I love Niku.
Niku's fun.
He's this eccentric Nikto character who, in a way, almost kind of he's like if Drax were cute and not violent.
Right.
He doesn't understand metaphors and sarcasm, and he takes everything very literally, but he's just a cute character, and it's very fun, and I love Niku, and his dynamic with Kaz, who he automatically decides is his best friend, is great.
I wanna kind of mention Bobby Moynihan and Donald Faison.
Goodness.
Essentially just these two guys, as soon as they hear that there's more Star Wars going on, they're constantly like, can I be in Star Wars? Can I do something in Star Wars? They both are just pestering the creators.
Yeah.
And they finally get voices to some really neat characters.
Yeah. Hyde Faison is Donald Faison's character.
I love that it's...
Yeah. Dave created the character for Donald Faison, which is why his last name is Faison as well.
That's great.
And then Orca, who is this little... what is the species name? They're the little bat-looking creatures, but his is a heavier character, so he looks more like a pig. But his name is Orca, and then his partner, which we learned is his romantic partner as well, holla for some gay representation in Star Wars, Flix, who is this bird character, is so great.
The species is Chadrafan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
He's
he's the little guy who's like begs for a drink in the cantina scene.
Right.
The little short little bat character. But yeah, Flix and Orca have the greatest dynamic. They might be my favorite in the series. There's
100%
this moment
my favorite.
where they run the acquisitions department, so like they're in charge of all the parts and stuff on the station, and there's this episode in season 1 where they have to go and they ask Kaz to watch the shop for them, and so Kaz is like, so why do you need me to watch this shop? And Flix is like, oh, it's a long story with a tragic ending. We're visiting my mother. And I was like, I am in love with you.
Oh, that was great.
It's it's so funny. I love their dynamic.
I think that is the episode that made them my 2 favorites.
Yeah.
So before we go on, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, not really. Other than just, man, watch these shows, guys. Like, they're not just for kids. Like, yes, they're geared towards children. But Star Wars is geared towards children. Like,
there's more specifically in Clone Wars and in Rebels, there's a lot of lore in there that you can really bite into.
And they're starting to get into some of it in Resistance Season 2.
From what I've heard, yes. I was gonna... and that makes me so excited to actually get into it myself.
Yeah.
Because I've just been so interested in what they're gonna do with it. You know, I've been thinking for a few months. So, I mean, you know, that's gonna be it for our topic today. Hopefully we've inspired you to watch these shows.
Watch the shows. They're all on Disney Plus. All 6 seasons of the Clone Wars, all 4 seasons of Rebels, and the first season of Resistance are all on Disney Plus. Please watch them so that Disney knows that people care about the Star Wars animation.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the more people watch those, you know, they have analysts looking at what stuff is being watched on their streaming network. So, like,
They ain't dumb. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, so the more people who watch these older cartoons that's going to encourage them to invest more money into future cartoons.
Right.
Which, that's the thing, is Resistance is ending this season. We don't know what's coming next.
Right.
They've had such success with animation, I can't imagine there's not another animated series in the works.
I imagine as soon as, you know, this season ends and we've gotten all of Clone Wars, then we'll get our announcement of what's next.
Yeah.
Especially with
maybe
them,
Celebration next year.
Right. Probably.
Yeah.
Especially with Filoni getting his new title of being in charge of the animation, essentially.
Right.
And but yeah, if you have anything you'd like us to cover on the show, feel free to tweet your suggestions to us at blipbloppod, or you can email them at blipblopbloopod@gmail.com. And now let's move on to our next segment.
There's always a bit of truth in legends.
So, yeah, this is the part of the show where we talk about something that we've been enjoying outside of Star Wars that we feel has an interesting Star Wars connection. So, Will, what have you been enjoying this week?
I talked to you a while ago about playing Dragon Age, and I mentioned the music was something I thought was similar, just the compositions. But I was playing it this week, and I can't remember the exact moment that I had that really kind of like was like, oh, that's very Star Wars like. But then I paused and I sat there. I'm like, you know what really connects this to Star Wars? BioWare.
Oh, nice.
So BioWare developed Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah,
lauded as the best Star Wars video game series,
and they're technically still working on it because the online game is still active. They're still doing content for it. It's not canon, but you can still go on and play the Old Republic online.
Right. And so it was just me kind of looking back at that and seeing how some similarities between the two games, and just especially in the first Dragon Age game, the combat's pretty similar. And so I just I couldn't believe I hadn't been connecting that recently, other than when, you know, I first bought bought the game years ago. And so that was just something that made me laugh when I was playing it the other day. What about you, Nate? What have you been
What
enjoying?
have I been enjoying that has a Star Wars connection? So for me, so I'm a huge fan of Steven Universe, which is a great series on Cartoon Network, and the new spin-off series, because the series is over, and they had their movie, the Steven Universe, the movie, and now they have a epilogue series called Steven Universe Future, which just came out last week, and it's just so fun, and it's about this galactic conflict in space. So, there's that. It's about a kid who has a magical destiny because of his parents, or his one parental figure who had magic powers, and at some points left a bit of a dark legacy. So kind of similar to Luke Skywalker in a way. Just some interesting thematic connections there. But also, the series features D. Bradley Baker, who is the voice of all the clones and many other voices in Star Wars. He does a lot of the creature voices, because if you can, you should look up D. Bradley Baker's creature demo reel on YouTube. The guy is insane. He can make realistic animal sounds with just his voice. Like, no editing, like, no modulators put on anything. The guy is nuts. He does that for so many other cartoons. He'll do creature voices for so many things. So yeah, it's a bit of a smaller connection this week. I've just been enjoying so much Star Wars content. Like I said, I've been rewatching all the movies. I've been enjoying The Mandalorian. I've been rewatching some of the cartoons. I'm still watching Lego Star Wars Freemaker Adventures, which is a lot of fun. So yeah, there's not a lot that isn't Star Wars that I'm enjoying. But yeah, if that's probably the one thing that I can think of is Steven Universe. But yeah, here we are, Will, the end of our episode. By the time we record our next episode, we both will have seen The Rise of Skywalker. I will have seen it twice.
Hopefully I will have seen it twice.
Hopefully you'll have seen it twice. Actually, I might see it 3 times by the time we record. Depends on when we get to it. But
right.
Man, the end of the saga. I know we basically did this last week, but man, how are you feeling? A week later, what we've got, as of recording this, we're recording on Sunday, so 4 days.
Yeah.
This week. The end of the Skywalker saga is this week.
I'm anxious, honestly. Yeah. I'm anxious to see it. I'm anxious to see what happens to all my... Honestly, I don't think there's a main character in this sequel trilogy that's not a favorite of mine in some way.
Yeah.
So in all intents and purposes, to see what happens with my favorite characters.
Yeah.
All of them. And honestly, one of the things I'm thinking about most is the music I'm going to hear.
Oh my goodness.
The closer I get to it, and this hasn't really been something that's been on my mind too much in the last 2 movies, but just like the music is so important, I think, just in general, but also like I feel like it just has this heavier weight this time.
Yeah.
Especially for me, because it's the end, and it's quite possibly the end for John Williams, and I'm emotional over that myself.
Yeah.
And I
don't know that he will, but I've heard rumors that he might retire with this score.
Right. And that's my point. Like
in any case, this is his last Star Wars score for sure.
True.
And man, yeah, I'm excited to hear what he does musically, bringing back old themes, mixing them in with new themes.
Yeah.
I'm always excited to hear new stuff, especially like with The Last Jedi when he introduced the spark. That boom, 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 ba-da-da-dum. It's so good. One of my favorite tracks in Star Wars. And yeah, I'm just... And with, like, bringing Lando and the Emperor back, like, we're going to hear so many great old themes come back. I watched an interview with him, and he was talking about Rey's theme and how this time it's a much more mature version of the theme. In that we've watched her grow up, and now she's, you know, this powerful woman, and the score reflects that. Her theme reflects that. You know, so I'm excited to hear that. And yeah, just to see the end. I love these characters so much. That's why to me, why I personally prefer The Force Awakens over A New Hope. Again, I don't like putting Star Wars over Star Wars, but just in terms of my enjoyment, just because I love all these characters so much. And The Force Awakens has the classic characters too, so like I'm not short of that. But I love Rey and Kylo Ren and Finn and Poe, and I just cannot wait to see the end of their story. Yeah. And you know, Anthony Daniels has been really emotional on the press tour talking about the end of his story. You know, the only one who's been in every movie, all 12 theatrically released movies. Yes, he did voice C-3PO in the Clone Wars movie. Not in the series, but in the movie he did.
That's true.
So he's been in every theatrically released Star Wars film. And this is his last one, and man, just to be him and John Williams.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's just him and John Williams, I think.
Yeah. Who've
been around the entire time. Wow. Man, yeah, just how cool it would be for them, and I'm so ready for it, man.
Same.
4 more days for us. And yeah, we'll be recording an episode all about it next week. We'll both have seen it a couple times, hopefully, and we'll record an episode full of spoilers. So fair warning if you're, you know, planning ahead to listen to it or whatever. We're not gonna shy away from spoilers in that episode because I don't think we could.
No,
even if we wanted to.
Yeah, no. The floodgates will be open for us, both, and we'll. You know, like, that's why we're giving you the warning now. We'll give it at the beginning of the episode, too. Yeah. And I'm sure both of us will have the same busting with happiness thing, too. So.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know. We may not even do the busting with happiness because it's going to be...
roll into it. The whole thing will be our busting with happiness, possibly.
we will be busting with happiness the entire time. Hopefully. Assuming that it's good. I mean, I don't see how it can't be, but... But that's our episode. Will, if people want to find you online, where can they find you?
You can follow me at Twitter at Heckahawk. That's really it. I'm not on any other social media.
Yeah, and you can follow me at Hall of Fame on Twitter and Instagram. That's Hall spelled Hawl, like my last name. And you can follow the show at BlipBlopPod on Twitter. But with that, I have been Nate Hawley.
And I'm Will Heckman.
Blip, bloppity, bloop, bye-bye.
So say goodnight, friend. Good night, but not goodbye.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here.